Hey everybody, I'm Nick Layton.
And I'm Leah Bottima.
And we're the hosts of Were You Raised by Wolves?
Each week we try to make the world a kinder, nicer place.
Well, that's the idea, at least.
I mean, we try.
Have you ever wondered what to do if you're ghosted?
Or what to do when a friend asks you to borrow money?
Or the proper way to eat Cheetos?
You know, the big questions.
So please find Were You Raised by Wolves wherever you listen.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
I'm Lou Bank.
And I'm Greg Benson.
And this is an ad for Ancestral Agave Syrup, the critically acclaimed award-winning syrup that helps gringo bartenders better make margaritas, Negronis,
Lou, hold up. Wait,
old
are you just
fashions?
This is how you start your podcast.
What?
It's not an ad for Ancestral Agave Syrup.
Well, of course it is. I'm just cutting costs by not paying writers to make something new. I'm just using an old script.
You pay writers?
Is that some kind of jab?
No, I'm just saying that.
What are you saying?
Well, look, we've got this amazing syrup that's made in an ancestral manner, cooked down from the sap of the agave, harvested the way these families would to make pulque. It's a quality product. It deserves a quality presentation.
Yeah, okay, hang on. Ancestral Agave Syrup is made by real families following traditional methods. Unlike the industrial Blue Weber syrup you get everywhere else, Ancestral is cooked down from agua miel, harvested from Salmiana in Hidalgo, Mexico. It is the grade A Vermont maple to the sticky diner syrup you've been using for your cocktails. Ingredients matter, both in how your cocktail tastes and how you treat the earth. Ancestral is better for both. Is that good?
Sure. Or maybe confusing instead of cheesy. Look, just visit ancestralagave.com to learn more and to order your world-class agave syrup today.
And we'll call that a wrap. Catch you next ad, Greg.
Hasta pronto?
Ancestral Agave Syrup. Available online at ancestralagave.org and wherever Greg and Lou are able to coerce store owners into carrying it.
Agave Road Trip. Agave Road Trip.
I'm Lou Bank.
Hi, I'm Ximena Beltran Quan Kiu.
And this is Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps great ex-bartenders better understand agave spirits, and rural Mexico. Ximena, I'm going to say just wrote, which is inaccurate, right? I mean, it's inaccurate for right now when we're recording this, but by the time this actually airs, it'll really be inaccurate. But the beauty of it is the article that you wrote is timeless.
That's right. I wrote about tascalate, a drink from Chiapas that is currently on the bar menu, and Beltran, which is a bar in Mexico City that is arguably considered one of the best bars in the world right now due to its cultural heritage and how it's showcasing Mexican spirits, artisans, and drinks and cultures through its bar menu.
Sweet. So the title of the article is An Ancient Drink Enters the 21st Century. Yeah, did I get that right?
You did. And it's referring to tascalate. So the drink traditionally is not alcoholic. There's no booze served into it. It is an ancient Mayan drink that people believe has been around for more than 3,000 years. It's made with maize, cacao, yachayote, and water. So it's a bunch of powders that are mixed together, pulverized, mixed together. And it's in large part because it was meant to last through the winter. It is, let's think about it of like, I don't even like I'm thinking of Nesquik, which is not healthy at all, but it's the Mexican in me thinking about like chocolate powder.
It may not, maybe it's not helping you, but it's helping me. I want to see that little bunny in tascalate orange. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, so it's it's the harvest. It's what's harvested and then preserved and then dried out that lasts the Chiapas people for many months through the winter months. It's very nutritional. It has health benefits. But again, there's people who believe, and there's records of it that show it's been around for more than 3,000 years. And so Teclan, I wrote about this for Punch. Teclan, the bar in Mexico City, has taken that base drink and introduced it with mezcal. It has mixed these two, and in a way that is the ethos of the bar. It has brought the culture up front through cocktails. So Eli Martinez, who is the head mixologist there, she was over at Pujol, I believe, for 6 or 7 years before, has a real invested interest in showcasing Mexican culture. What she told me in specific was that she wants any Mexican who comes in to feel really proud about their culture, and anyone who is not Mexican to feel jealous that they are not Mexican. And
and gives them an opportunity to drink in the culture.
And again, it's a matter of meeting people where they are. You know, something that was really intriguing to me about the bar is that when I went, I visited it, and I pulled up their Instagram account, and they're only following 4 accounts. They have about 25,000 followers. They follow 4 people.
Wow.
And they're actually it's museums, you know, it's a Museo de Antropología. I have to look back to see what the other 3 are, but that kind of piqued my interest. You know, what is a bar doing following museums? Like, what is a connection? And that is something I asked Ellie about. And she explained to me that part of Teclan's ethos is that it's meant to introduce people and get really excited. It might be through the nightlife, through cocktails, through food. But once someone's there, it's an entry point for other Mexican things, other Mexican culture. And something that they are looking to do is point people to some of those institutions, those cultural institutions that can better showcase and highlight that diversity, that richness, that history of what being Mexican actually means.
Oh, so how are they doing that? How are they doing that? And then I've got a follow-up thing. But yeah, please.
So there are some of the drinks that they have chosen are, again, very historical drinks associated with certain regions. So Chiapas shares a border close to Guatemala, if I'm remembering my geography correctly. So you're talking about the very southern part of Mexico. It's not the center, like a place like the United States. It's going to vary from region to region. So even if someone is Mexican, there's a good chance that if they live in Mexico City, they're unfamiliar with tascalate because it's a regional drink. And same, they serve a garajillo, which is a coffee-based drink as well. And so what they're doing is taking these things that we might associate, like we do with the South. We'll think of like fried chicken, or a Cosmo, I think of Sex and the City, so I think of New York. There's drinks that we associate, and beer with the Midwest. So they're taking those aspects of the country of Mexico and developing drinks that showcase that while using small batch suppliers of mezcal and tequila to bring those spirits in. And what I also found really interesting at the bar is that they are really thinking about sustainable practices. So at any point, they're rotating. They use it would be essentially like private label, right? This is not Don Julio that's behind the bar. It's actually not branded stuff. They know the makers in Mexico. They bring small batches. It might actually be only like 10 bottles that they get from a distiller. And then they rotate to ensure that they're not hemorrhaging the land, pillaging it because there's such demand for it. So they're also
spread the pressure out.
They're alleviating that pressure by using a number of distillers during any specific time. So does that answer your question? I know you had a follow-up question from there, and you probably actually better know. You probably actually know the practice better than I do when it comes to the farming piece.
Well, you know, I wouldn't claim to know anything better than anybody else. But you know, when I hear what you're saying about this place, and I've never been to Tlecán. I was connected briefly to a guy who was involved with it, but I've never actually been. And I'm headed down to Mexico City this weekend, and I'll probably check it out on Saturday. Probably. not definitely. But what I'm reminded of actually is this restaurant called Mezcal in Roma Norte. Are you familiar with this place?
I'm not.
So, it sounds to me very similar, but from the food angle. And in essence, my interpretation of what they're doing at this restaurant is it was founded by the chief curator of the Folk Art Museum in Mexico City. And so many of the dishes are reflections of the cultural dishes from different regions in Mexico that harken back to things that you just don't see anymore. There's one dish in particular that I go a little nuts for called the matzo that is like a pre-Hispanic version of chilaquiles. Now, having said that, there's pork in it, so it can't be all that pre-Hispanic. But it's this different way of presenting the dishes that we've become so used to seeing, right? But all done by hand using beautiful ingredients sourced from the places that would be the natural places that they come from. And because this is really curated, if you will, by the chief curator of the Folk Art Museum, it feels to me like they're taking an approach to food that recognizes it as sort of a form of folk art.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hearing in what you're talking about.
There is a shift. I would say I've written about this for Food and Wine. So about 20 years ago, when you see, what would you call it? Like the rise of Mexican food and fine dining cuisine because of restaurants like Pujol and Quintonin, but really Chef Enriquez at the heart of it is that what you're describing, it's indigenous cuisine. It hasn't actually really gone away. There's a word for it in Spanish. It's like, it's been menospreciado, which is, it's been unappreciated. So even when you ask me, have I eaten at the restaurant? I haven't, but in large part because I actually, not until very recently, I didn't really eat at restaurants when I would go to Mexico City. I'm from Mexico City. I ate the street food. And the street food to me really held a lot of the culture because again, up until 20 years ago, a career in dining was unheard of. You would be in Mexican culture, made fun of. It was thought that you couldn't cut it. You didn't have skills. That's the only skill you could fall back on. So people looked down on it as a way to make a life, your livelihood. When the reality of it is, which we're beginning to see now, and you're beginning to see a lot of bars and restaurants capitalize on, is that those people actually carry centuries of information. They have been practicing making tortillas, cochito pibil, and like these regional foods for many, many years, and they've learned it from their families, their parents or grandparents or great grandparents. There's a lot of historical knowledge there that not until 20 years ago, approximately, has begun to become appreciated, but it wasn't before. So this idea of what you're talking about and this food being showcased in a restaurant in a very fancy setting is actually very new and recent. And you can look at it. I mean, the unfortunate part about globalization is that there is a desire to consume, eat American food and American culture. And so these places that have kind of fought back against that, resisted, and have begun to reclaim that knowledge and to showcase that history is also really important. But I'm always really careful, especially when we're talking about that sense of pride that comes in Mexican food, that hasn't been the case, and that hasn't been the case within the culture. So that's not something that's like other cultures are saying that. No. There is a colorism that exists in Mexico. There is social constructs that prevent people from there's a battle between indigenous Mexicans, let's call them, and more European centric Mexicans.
Yeah. I saw this firsthand for the first time actually in 2013 when I was down. My wife and I were down for the holidays, and we had dinner with a friend of mine who's also from Chicago. and his, at the time, fiance, who was living in Mexico City. And she asked what we were doing, and I said, going down to Oaxaca. And she, I mean, to say she gasped would be an exaggeration, but it wasn't a great exaggeration. And she really didn't understand what it could be that interested us. And this is 2013, 10 years ago, well, 11. 10. What it was that interested us in this place that she clearly didn't see value in, right? And Mezcal was very much the same way in 2013 in Mexico City. And you were starting to see little glimpses of it in some beautiful mezcalerias. But it certainly wasn't it certainly wasn't then what it is now. And I'm suspecting that followed a similar trajectory to the food. And it makes me wonder, does tascalate follow the same trajectory as the food? Is it on its own trajectory? Is this a new thing for tascalate?
That's a good question. When I spoke to Ellie about this, and she mentioned she had been the beverage director over at Pujon, what do people talk about Pujon about? It's really the food. They're not talking about the drinks or the cocktails, but the attention to detail to the cocktails is equally as great as attention to food. So I think to your point, to your question, it is a larger reckoning, let's call it, about what food, what spirits and the space that it holds next to food and the space that it holds, especially in these critically acclaimed, imaginative, innovative restaurants. Because the reality of it is, at least from what I have seen, cocktails don't get the same treatment. There might be like wine that's exciting and you think about pairings, but spirits in general, that piece of it is seen as just that. It's a piece of it. It's an addendum. It really isn't the focal piece. And I think what is really exciting of Teclan is that it puts cocktails at the center of it, of that storytelling, of those ingredients, that technique, how it's building. And there are food items that are presented on the menu. They have a pambazo on there, and it's a very short menu. I think there's only like 3 or 4 items, but it kind of flips that idea that it's going to be cocktail forward. And we hear that a lot, right? Like, this is a cocktail forward place, but what does that really mean? And from what I have seen, there are really few places who take the time to really be intentional about the story that they're telling, the ingredients, how it fits into the larger concept, and taste and technique. And it can't just be about what's really, I think why a place like this stands out is that it can't just be about the taste, unfortunately. You're up against so many great places in Mexico City. Again, Food and Wine named Mexico City the #1 culinary destination in the world, voted by readers. And I know because I wrote the piece, the intro for it. And so you have people, it's a very competitive space. It's not enough to just taste good. It can't be just trendy. It really, I think, to break through and have these cultural touch points where people are excited about it, they're telling their friends about it. It's because it's resonating on a deeper level, which is there's a story being told through every ingredient, every touch point. There's a sharp attention to detail, and that creates this like magical alchemy that is drawing people to it. Because the reality of it is too, it's not a gigantic place. It's about, I think if you're shoulder to shoulder, probably holds 30 people, less.
Oh, okay.
And they have someone at the door who makes sure that there's enough space for people to feel comfortable, that you're not shoulder to shoulder. So it's a highly curated, highly sensory experience. And that is by design. So even when you come off the street, it is noisy. It's Mexico City. It's very noisy. The lighting is dark. It's got a bluish green tint to it. And then you walk in and it's very narrow and it's probably less than 5 feet, but immediately you sense that the whole environment change. It kind of goes quiet. It goes dark. The lighting is red. They have museum lighting. So things are lit from above and below. The material is tactile. Again, this is by design, that they wanted to mimic a museum/gallery feel.
Mhm.
And what can you not do at a museum that I think all of us have wanted to do since we were children is touch things. So when you run your hand up against the bar, you can feel the grittiness to it. It's not polished stone.
Sweet.
In the back, there is a replica of Mictlan, which is a god of death, the Aztec goddess of death. There's a big, it looks like a big round stone with a human skull in the middle. That's very emblematic of the Museo de Antropología in Mexico City. And then behind the bar, they have these like gigantic cacerolas, like big pots, ancient antique pots that they're cooking, and there's smoke coming out of it. So it feels very fire-y, like you're in Hephaestus's lair, and there's smoke and it's
Nice.
red, and it's just completely different. And all of that is designed by the team so that all of your senses, the touch, auditory, visual, your taste buds are being stimulated.
So listen, I know you've got a hard out in 4 minutes, so I'm going to ask you a question. If you feel like it's a question too complicated to answer in those 4 minutes, just say
I'll be
so.
late for
That's
my
okay.
meeting.
So my question is this: this is a podcast for gringo bartenders, right? Gringex bartenders. And they go down to Mexico City. They go to this bar. They fall in love with this tascalate martini or whatever they're calling it. And if they're not calling it that, they should, because that's how it catches on. And then they say, I'm going to duplicate that back home. What do you think?
What do I think in terms of what's like, is it going to be easy? Is it going to be hard? Give me a little more.
Oh, no.
context.
Is it going to be appropriate or is it going to be appropriation? That's my question.
I don't know. I think that's a really complicated question, and that you're right in the sense that, one, why would they replicate it, right? That's like, I think that's the biggest question. What is your motivation behind it? What are you doing it for? I think too, Teclan, what is really special about that place is also that you should feel inspired and moved and want to take action in some kind of way. So I don't think that's inappropriate. I think it's just a matter of like, what are the reasons behind it?
Huh. Okay. But that begs the follow-up question, which I guess is which motivations are acceptable, which are not. And then if you are of the acceptable motivations, and I'm not sure how you make that how you distinguish between the two, but then like how do you figure out how to make it? How do you get the ingredients? There's a lot behind that, right?
Yeah, that's why I have a hard time answering that question, because actually my mind goes to the logistics. Like in my mind, I'm like, LOLs, good luck. How are you going to get achiote? Like, how are you going to get these things imported? And I think that's some of the.
I'm gonna head to Itanoni in Oaxaca. I'm gonna get the powder there, and I'm gonna throw it in with my vodka, and I'm gonna call it a day.
And again, like
Declan,
what they do is they could make it in house. They could buy it nearby. They actually do go to Chiapas and buy it directly from farmers. And again, like it could be a lot easier for them just to do it themselves, and they don't. And so again, when you ask a question like that, so hypothetical for me that I can't answer it, but ultimately it's like, great. I think if you are considering something like that, will you hold it up to the standard that these folks do, which is go through all the means? And if you're willing to struggle for it, then like, good for you. You deserve to do it. If you're not, you got to check your motivations.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. Okay, and I think we can wrap it on that, and we can get you off to your meeting on time, Ximena. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Agave Road Trip, and I hope I get to see you down the road.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I think it's important what you're doing, and to have people hear new things, consider new things, and challenge their old ideas, their old ways of thinking.
Amen. Thanks so much, Ximena. You've been listening to Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps Gringex bartenders better understand agave spirits, and rural Mexico. We're blessed with sound engineering by Roy Sierra and a theme song performed by Gabriel Oliveira and Marco Ricos. Sign up to become a road tripper and listen to more episodes at agaveroadtrip.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know. And if you hated it, well, I'm sure you'll let us know that too. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Agave Road Trip. Agave Road Trip is a production of 10 Angry Pit Bulls, Inc. Agave Road Trip is powered by Simplecast. Thank you for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. To subscribe to the Heritage Radio newsletter, enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with Heritage Radio Network on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find Heritage Radio Network at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization using the power of educational storytelling about food to build a more equitable, resilient food system. Heritage Radio Network couldn't do that without support from listeners like you. Become a part of the world's most innovative community today. Subscribe to the shows you like. Tell your friends. And please join the Heritage Radio Network family by becoming a member. To become a member of the Heritage Radio Network, click on the beating heart of our homepage. Heritage Radio Network can become addictive. Programming you hear on Heritage Radio Network might lead you to eat, drink, and listen to more programming on Heritage Radio Network. If you drink, please do not drink and drive. Drink responsibly. Drive responsibly. Eat responsibly too. And listen to Heritage Radio Network responsibly. To listen to Heritage Radio Network responsibly, wear protective earbuds. While wearing protective earbuds, do not drive. Do not walk either. Sit in a comfortable chair. If that comfortable chair has a hard seat, please remember to stretch every 30 minutes. If you stretch every 30 minutes, please stay within your defined stretching capacity. And consult a doctor who specializes in stretching. If you don't have a doctor, maybe Dr. Ryan Acock, the Cocktail MD, can help you out. Thanks for listening. Agave Road Trip out.
Hey, it's Francis Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. Every week on our show, we talk about food and cooking and the meanings of food and cooking. We talk with the most interesting people in food about their techniques, their culture, and everything in between. Whether it's about how fried chicken took over the world or how Instagram changes the way people are actually eating. It's a food show where everyone is welcome. Come join us. You can listen to The Splendid Table wherever you get your podcasts.